It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to a special programme, Grounded, Flight Disruption. Over the next half hour, we'll be hearing from passengers stranded after the major breakdown in the UK's air traffic control system. We'll also be joined by an expert panel. How long will the disruption last, and could this happen again? Or why there are days of flight disruption still to come after yesterday's failure that triggered widespread cancellations of flights in and out of the UK. A holidaymaker's nightmare, more than 1,500 flights cancelled or delayed on what is usually one of the busiest travel days of the year. Passengers stranded, sleeping on the floor. People trying to return from holiday are left with nowhere to stay, with many unable to get home for days.
We weren't given any information to do with where we were going to be able to stay for the night. We've slept in the airport and expected to sleep again.
National Air Traffic Control has apologised and that said that it's operating normally. But Ryanair boss says the failure is unacceptable.
Where were their backup systems? It's not acceptable that UK NAT simply allow their computer systems to be taken down and everybody's flights get cancelled and delayed.
Good evening. Michael O'Leary, the outspoken boss of Europe's biggest airline, may not be everyone's cup of tea. But when Ryanair's chief executive said today that the failure in UK air traffic control was simply not acceptable, he was speaking for many. Tens of thousands more passengers face cancellations today as the industry tried to recover after Monday's technical failure. An estimated 250,000 people overall are believed to have been affected. Well, customers are facing more uncertainty. Many who were due to fly back yesterday are still stranded, forced to sleep in airports, unable to rebook. Well, throughout tonight's programme, we're joined by Roger Whitefield, a pilot, former board member of the Civil Aviation Authority and former head of safety and quality at British Airways, as well as Cathy Adams, senior travel content editor for The Times and Sunday Times. We'll be asking how this happened, what we can expect over the coming days, and could this happen again? Let's hope not. Not too soon anyway. Well, first, though, let's speak to Georgina Stavru, who's stranded in Cyprus with her husband and 2 young children. Good evening, Georgina. Gina, sorry. Good to have you with us. I guess in happier circumstances would have been better, I'm sure. Tell us what happened to you, because you were stranded at Larnaca, hoping to get back in time to get back to work and get your kids to school.
Absolutely. So we were due to fly yesterday at 2:25 Larnaca time. So that would have been about 12:25 in the UK. We were called to the gate, and then there were murmurings amongst fellow passengers that there may be a delay. We were then told by the assistants at the gates that there was an issue with air traffic control in the UK, and that they would update us in an hour. We were then updated in an hour and told to board the flight. We boarded the flight, and we were told by the captain that flight plans were being dealt with manually, and that if we could tell air traffic control that we had a flight ready, baggage, passengers, crew, everybody ready, then there was more chance of us departing, perhaps being given a slot, as opposed to being left in the airport. And that's not something that they would have allowed, for us to get a slot to leave.
So what have you been told now? Clearly there was a lot of back and forth, which must have been extremely frustrating and exhausting with 2 children. Where are you at right now?
Absolutely. So we were told to disembark the aircraft because the crew were out of hours. So 2 hours sitting in the aircraft, we were then told to disembark. We were given the impression and told by cabin crew that we were a locked flight, which meant the plane, the crew, the pilots and the passengers would travel. The next earliest opportunity would presumably have been today. But unfortunately, we tried contacting BA. Their communications were really poor. We weren't given any information. We were told to call a number here in Cyprus, but they didn't have any information last night, and this morning they weren't answering the phones. We finally got through to BA in the UK about 8 o'clock UK time this morning, and we were told that our flight had been cancelled, and as a result, we would be rebooked on a next available flight, which is Saturday, which is not really acceptable. I had to be at work today.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, actually, what is the knock-on impact for you? And do you have insurance? If you can tell us all of that in one go, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we do have insurance, but obviously the insurance has said that you need to go through the airline first. And the airline have said to us, keep your receipts, we'll reimburse you for hotel stays, taxis, car hires, etc. But that information has been more us trying to get that information from the airline provider, as opposed to them offering that to us and explaining the situation to us. I think that's the disappointing part. Their communication to us has been really, really bad. They haven't even
hoping to
had a
get
risk
back
assessment.
to work as well, of course. So the impact is great for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a partner in a law firm in central London. I can't be away for another week. I've been away for 2 weeks already. You know, I work for a very big firm in central London, Freeman's, so I can't be away for this amount of time. But they obviously didn't really take that on board. My children go back to school next week. My husband's an accountant. He's got to get to work as well. So it's just unacceptable that, you know, we haven't even had a phone call from BA to advise us as to what our options were. We were the ones having to initiate all the contact with BA. And the frustrating point for us is that there was an aircraft here in Larnaca that we were to board today, presumably, because we should have been given priority, having been affected. But instead, they flew that aircraft out of Larnaca today back to London. And that's really upsetting for us, because we should have been on that flight. It's unacceptable that we weren't. We were just pushed aside, and their flights for today have gone on as normal, perhaps with some delay. But we've just been left to kind of have to wait until Saturday to get home.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there. Gina Stavry, thanks very much indeed for joining us live from Cyprus tonight here on this special programme on Sky News. Well, let's bring in our panellists now. Roger Whitefield, who, as I mentioned, is a pilot and working in aviation for many decades, and Cathy Adams, from a travel writer, working in the travel industry for a while now too. Gosh, where to start? I guess, first of all, Roger, let's talk about this failure, the technical failure. Do you think they did pretty well in handling it, or would you expect them to have been able to switch to manual mode faster and deal with the backlog faster as well?
I think it is difficult to actually pass judgment on them yet until they get to the bottom of what has gone wrong. However, I think that once you start to change over from a fully automated system to a manual system, there has got to be a certain amount of time lag in it. And we all know that every time you do something manually, it takes longer.
It's slower.
It is slower. And so,
but the key, as you say, is to find out actually what went wrong. We've just been told technical failure, and not much more communication than that. Is that satisfactory?
Well, I think yes. In the round, it is much easier to plod through all the things that you could be looking at. Make sure you don't start hairs running in the wrong direction.
Right.
Let's face it, I've heard some beauties today already. They're blaming a poor Frenchman somewhere for something. And I'm sure it wasn't him, but it is it's our national trait. When anything goes wrong on a bank holiday, is to blame the French.
I mean, a fair point. So we need to really know what went wrong, and it's understandable that it takes time to switch from obviously high-speed digital to manual. Cathy, we heard there from Gina, and we're going to hear from more people travelling today, and we've got some viewers' questions as well to come. But just from listening to what Gina was saying, do you think the communication has been good enough from airlines?
No, never. And it seems to be a really common trait at the moment that throughout summer disruption, you know, whether it's strikes or it's, you know, baggage issues, airline communication is never very good, it has to be said. And, you know, they do have, in their defence, they do have thousands, hundreds of thousands of passengers yesterday and today dealing with cancelled flights, you know, like onward journeys. They've got various kind of connecting issues as well. So they are trying their best. And I mean, I've actually been speaking to some readers of the Times and Sunday Times today, and a few of them were even saying, actually, BA and Ryanair were handling this really well. And I had to say, is this a joke? But it is lovely to hear, nonetheless. But yeah, airlines are never very proactive. And I think in a way, when it comes to delays, cancellations, duty of care, it actually works in their favour sometimes never to make the rules too clear and not really to make people aware of what they are liable for and what their obligation is.
And we're going to come back to you on that. So stay tuned to find out what you should be aware of. But first, the evidence we've heard today is of holidays and lives disrupted by the air traffic failure, both at home and abroad. Well, one woman told us about being trapped in Norway and running short of medication, essential medication that she needs. Now, another told us how the disruption meant her family's first foreign holiday since COVID had now been cancelled. Sky's Katerina Vitozzi reports from Manchester Airport.
In moments like this, home feels very far away. For thousands of Britons still stuck overseas, there have been hours spent on cold floors and in long queues. This video was from late Monday night at Fuerteventura Airport.
Right, so my EasyJet website that we can all access says that you guys have to, by law, accommodate us.
All hotels were full, leaving passengers, many with young children, with nowhere to stay. We spoke to one family stranded in Norway with no flight home until Saturday.
I myself am on medication for a rare blood disorder. My husband is in a wheelchair and has a rare neurological disease. And because it was my son's wedding, we also brought their 83-year-old grandmother with us. So I'm going to run out of medication. I've had to cancel work. I've had to cancel hospital appointments. I'm now trying to get medication. It's just, it's not okay.
It has been, for many, utter misery.
It is incredible to reflect that a technical glitch that was resolved in a matter of hours continues to cause such intense disruption both in the UK and overseas. Here at Manchester Airport, well, yesterday it was one of the most affected airports in the UK, and although there are flights still operating today, we're told that many are cancelled and there are severe delays on others.
Ryanair says its cancellations alone have affected around 40,000 passengers and that there needs to be answers still from NATS, the company that provides the air traffic systems.
We still haven't had an explanation from them what exactly caused this failure yesterday and where were their backup systems. It's not acceptable that UK NATS simply allow their computer systems to be taken down and everybody's flights get cancelled and delayed.
In a statement, NATS told Sky News that systems were operating as normal, that there is no indication it was a cyber attack.
The Transport Secretary is in constant dialogue with all the industry participants. He'll be talking to airlines specifically later today and making sure that they support passengers to get home as quickly as possible.
There'll also be an investigation into what happened, but for many families it's too little too late. Georgina Breers' all-inclusive holiday to Greece was cancelled. It would have been the first time away for her two kids since before the pandemic.
I even start crying thinking about it. It just breaks my heart because it's just not fair on them. We've got no other option. Even looking for places in the UK, how am I supposed to do that now with... They've got my money. Who has another spare £3,000?
Automated messages she received today from her Greek holiday rep simply rub salt into the wound.
If you need us outside of these times, please get in touch. Have a lovely holiday.
This is a summer break some will want to forget, but one that, for many, never even got started. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News.
OK, well, let's bring in our panellists, Roger Whitefield and Cathy Adams. Cathy, we've had a very popular question throughout the day here on Sky News from our viewers, and it's an obvious one. What do you do if you can't afford the accommodation and the food that you're supposed to spend extra? A lot of people spend their savings from their whole year on this one holiday.
Yeah, I mean, we know that holidays are so important and, they are, for some people, that real marker in a great summer and people want to have a great time. So, first of all, it's really important to say that airlines have a duty of care towards their passengers. And that means if your flight is cancelled, which, as we know, hundreds were yesterday and similarly today, that means that airlines have to put you on the next alternative flight. Now, importantly, that can be with a rival carrier. So as we heard earlier, often BA will try and say, well, actually, the next flight is in a week's time, but actually they are legally obliged to put you on the next available flight, whenever that may be, on arrival carrier. They also have to feed and give you something to drink while you're waiting and put you up in a hotel and give you various other things,
Does it matter
phone calls,
how many
internet
days
minutes.
it is?
So that kicks in when your flight for a short flight has been delayed for 2 days. And no, it doesn't, because they have a duty of care towards you from A to B. They have said that they'll get you from A to B. They need to look after you until you safely touch down at your destination. Unfortunately, though, and this has been a common question to me today, can I get compensation? And the answer is no, because it falls under what airlines call extraordinary circumstances. It's not their fault. It's nothing that they could personally control. Compensation isn't due, but it's really important that, they have a duty of care. They have to look after you. Now, the original question, what happens if you can't afford that? Some airlines today are saying, we are just too overloaded. We can't possibly go and book you a hotel. We can't, go and give you meal vouchers. So please go off and you buy those yourself and we'll reimburse you for reasonable expenses. What's reasonable expenses and what happens if you can't afford to pay those out of pocket?
Very quick. We'll come back to more detail. You have a wealth of, you're a font of information, which is why we have you on the show. But I wanted to bring Roger in. Roger, look, we heard from Gina there and we've heard from people in Katerina's report there, that they are being told that they might not get flights back for days on end. So, and the impact is ongoing, isn't it? And actually, when I was reading earlier about this, it's for people to understand, it's not just flights coming in and out of the UK, it was flights trying to go overhead as well, just go through our airspace that were disrupted. It's a phenomenal amount of flights affected.
Well, it is a very complicated patchwork quilt that goes overhead the UK. All of the European flights just about come through UK airspace on their way to the whole of the North American seaboard. It is a very complex picture. And once you've taken out the clever tools that you need every day to get you from A to B, there's an awful lot of work to be done. There's a very clever way that they try and get around UK airspace by rerouting over France and then going out past Spain and then across. Of course, that delays you. You haven't got crews in the right place where the aeroplane goes to, and all these wonderful, complicated things that make up our air travel system that are stretched to the limit. I felt sorry for poor Gina and everybody else who's in this position. It's no fun. But once you have an aeroplane stuck somewhere and crews running out of flight time limited hours, it gets worse and worse rather than better and better.
Yeah. Sadly, for a lot of our viewers. Yeah. OK, well, Britons across Europe have been stranded at airports. Earlier, one traveller, Martin McCall, spoke to Sky about his experience. Let's listen in.
We were told nothing. We weren't given any information to do with where we were going to be able to stay for the night. We've slept in the airport and expected to sleep again. We weren't given any information to do with how we were going to get transferred flights or people who had connecting flights or where to eat. We've not been given any vouchers or any food or any complimentary items at all. There was children who didn't have any blankets, or we've been given water bottles, but that was a good few hours ago now, and there's not been any refill. We're kind of just in the dust here. We've not got any options.
Kathy, so many stories like that to be told, thousands, of course. One of the questions we've had from Nicola Baker, she said, I paid for return flights with Ryanair. They're only offering me a refund for the cancelled flight. Can I claim for my return, as obviously I can't now use it?
It's a really good question, and what people need to know is that Ryanair, like most budget carriers, are what we call a point-to-point airline. So they will only refund you for the sector that has been affected. Obviously, in most cases, and if you haven't booked it as a package, which most people don't when they book a budget flight, only that particular flight they are liable for. The next option, though, there is to pursue a claim via your travel insurance. And really travel insurance, especially after all of the issues we've seen yesterday, last summer, this summer, really should be, one thing on travellers' bucket lists, and they should be getting it. So I would say try and pursue a claim through your travel insurance, because that really is your only option.
Jack said his flight was cancelled for 2 days. Can he claim loss of earnings? And on that, a lot of people missing work.
Yeah,
despite the fact that the pandemic taught us all that we can work from home, there are many people who simply can't. They have to go into the office, or at least have to be in country. Can they claim some kind of compensation for loss of earnings?
No, I'm so sorry. No. The answer is no. I spoke to a reader earlier.
I love a quick answer.
Saying, I am self-employed. And yeah, the answer is no. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're having a chuckle, but obviously it's really serious.
Yeah, it's not a laughing
It's horrific
matter.
for people. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That we get our insurance when we go on holiday thinking that we'll be fine, but the devil is in the detail.
Absolutely.
When something like this extraordinary circumstances happens. Surprising Nats doesn't have insurance, Roger. So I want to pick your brains, Roger, about this technical fault. I heard earlier that they're ruling out a cyber attack. Should we be more worried by the fact that it's not a cyber attack, that means there might be a glitch in the system? Should people be concerned about that? Or is it likely to happen again?
I think the simple answer to that is I don't know. I think the likelihood of it happening again is remote, purely because the investigation will be thorough. They will dig into the bowels of the computer and find out what did go wrong. So I don't think an identical situation will come about. However, I think you have to balance this up against the fact that the system, in fact, did work. It shut itself down and refused to take certain inputs in the interest of safety. Every system in aviation is layered and layered in safety bits, and it is in some way. I know if you're feeling very grumpy and are stranded in a foreign airport, this is not going to make you feel any better. But you can actually take some satisfaction out of the fact that the system and the cutouts in the system did work.
Right, I didn't realise that the system actually switched itself off to protect it from making any further mistakes.
I put that very crudely. The bits that went wrong, and I'm not heavily into this, did mean that it had to be shut down. Well, it shut down in as much as it was not automatic. Planes still carried on flying. Not many of them, I must admit.
Yeah, but some of them carried on. Roger Whitefield, Cathy Adams, stay with us. This is Grounded, flight disruption, live here on Sky News. With Britain stranded across Europe in a second day of travel disruption, we'll explore why so many flights have been cancelled. Stay with us.
Westminster, the heart of British politics, where laws are made and scandal is never far away. Whether it's how much rent you pay, the school your kids go to, the businesses that survive on your high street. What happens here matters. But it's time for a new type of politics show. We'll focus on the issues that affect you, but we promise to have a bit of fun along the way. So join me as we analyse, explore and discover on the Politics Hub on Sky News.
Between July 2017 and July 2023, the number of operating pharmacies in England has fallen by about 914. So we're at about 10,800 at the moment. It is concerning because pharmacies tend to be in areas of high deprivation. So that means the people who most need these pharmacies are actually losing access to them. And we've seen during this pandemic, people queuing to go and see their pharmacists. They know the support that's available there. And it's a risk to health. It's a risk to the local community who then can't access these pharmacies. Now, the issue at the moment is you might say to me, well, there's a few pharmacies close together. Well, they're geared up to cater for the numbers that they're catered up to deal with. But when we have closures, that means that there can be an influx, which we're not geared up to deal with because of the funding pressures that have been on us for a number of years now. So there's been a cumulative loss of about 800 million in funding for community pharmacy over the past 5 years as a result of inflation. We've got pressures on us, such as the shortages that we are having to deal with. We're spending hours a day trying to locate medication. Our staff are at high risk of burnout because there is more being expected of them, and we do want to do more, but more funding has to arrive with that. And then earlier this year, we heard the announcement that pharmacies will be dealing with common conditions in the future, so hopefully this winter. But we're still waiting for the funding and information on that to follow. So it is a very concerning picture for patients who should be able to access the care that they need easily. And given that we are also reducing the pressure on other parts of the health service.
Welcome back. You're watching Grounded. Flight disruption here on Sky News. Now, thousands more airline passengers have had their flights cancelled today. That's as the fallout continues after an air traffic control fault on Bank Holiday Monday. Well, our technology correspondent, Arti Nachiappan, has been exploring how the flight management system should ordinarily work and how it also differed yesterday.
With more of us flying more often, the role of air traffic control to keep us safe and maintain order in the sky has become ever more important. This is what a typical day of air traffic looks like coming into the UK, going out of the country and flying across it. As you can see, it's pretty busy. But yesterday, regular programming was disrupted after the National Air Traffic Services suffered a technical issue that brought down its operations. So what should normally happen before a flight takes off? First, a flight plan is produced by the pilot. It's then sent on to air traffic control, where it's automatically uploaded onto its overarching system. But yesterday, because of the technical failure, the system reverted to doing it manually. I spoke to a former board member of the Civil Aviation Authority who explained that this is why fewer planes took off.
As soon as you can't load them automatically and then have to do it slowly and manually, that is when you have to go and put a flow rate in place and cut down the number of aeroplanes that you can handle at any one time.
To give you an idea of the scale of the problem, here's a snapshot of the flights coming into and out of the UK last Monday at 5 p.m. But when we go to the same time yesterday, you can see that the cluster of flights is massively reduced. So how many journeys were affected? 790 flights were cancelled leaving airports across the UK. That's around 27% of all departures. Another 785 flights were cancelled coming into the UK, which is about 27% of arrivals. Overall, Heathrow had the highest number of cancellations, followed by Gatwick and Manchester Airport. Although the technical problem has now been fixed, the disruptions continue today. As of 9 a.m. this morning, 147 flights were cancelled leaving the UK. And another 134 flights were cancelled coming into UK airports. This is around 5% of all arrivals and departures. We are expecting answers on what caused the disruption in the coming days. But this will be of little comfort to those passengers still waiting to come home.
OK, let's bring in our panellists, Roger Whitefield, former pilot and former board member of the Civil Aviation Authority, and Cathy Adams, senior travel content editor for The Times and Sunday Times. I want to come to you first, Roger. I had an interesting question from a viewer, Steve, who asks a pretty fair question. Why is there no backup system if the air traffic control system goes down or glitches occur?
It's a very good question. The major system is down at Swanwick on the south coast, and there's also been duplicated up in Scotland. Unfortunately, Loading of flight plans is not duplicated in both, as far as I understand it. So whatever happened, so affected both the centres. Otherwise, built-in redundancy is something that you really need in aviation. Most airfields have redundant equipment. Aeroplanes usually have triple systems to make sure that they are safe. The answer to that is, I think I will have to wait and see what NATS say.
Again, and the problem is that NATS has been pretty quiet, but I guess the backup of the backup is humans, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's humans doing it manually.
You could say, you know, that there is a backup system, but it did work. You know, let's face it, no aeroplane or passenger was put in a dangerous position.
Yes, and that's something very much to be grateful for, of course. And actually, a timely reminder, we forget that there was no incident involved because of the failure at air traffic control. So, Cathy, back to viewers' main concerns right now, and that is, of course, compensation and the impacts, because how long can this go on for? We've heard Gina right at the top of the programme saying her next available flight isn't until Saturday.
I mean, airlines have been saying that it will continue throughout this week, you know, to sort of Friday, Saturday, potentially. But we've already seen today that things have got, you know, massively better fairly quickly. I think yesterday it was at 1,500 flights, UK flights cancelled. Today it's half that number. Things are getting better hour by hour. And, you know, hopefully by the weekend we're going to have a situation where it's only a handful of passengers that are affected by this, and most flights are operating normally. NATS have said they're operating normally. You know, airlines are getting back to normal as fast as they can, and it is very much in their interest to do so. So I'm really hoping that the next couple of days things are going to, you know, really look a lot brighter.
OK, so it's going to take some time, but hopefully not more than a few days.
No, I hope so. But, you know, as we've been talking about, aviation is an incredibly complex puzzle of jurisdictions, airspaces. It's really hard, all involving people, and it's a very emotional issue as well. So I think it really is in everybody's interest just to try and get back to normal. Kids are going back to school. Obviously, we're coming to the end of a really busy travel period over this summer, and we've been lucky that this hasn't happened any other time. So, you know, if that is a silver lining, then we should try and take it.
Yeah, Cathy Adams and Roger Whitefield, thank you. Well, that's all for our special programme. Thank you both for joining us. Roger Whitefield, former board member of the Civil Aviation Authority, and Cathy Adams, senior travel content editor for The Times and Sunday Times. Good to have your expertise with us for this one. Well, there's more analysis tonight on the Sky News Daily podcast with Neil Patterson, who's speaking to the travel expert Simon